Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Seer. So Seer is pretty much only an off-lane hero. There have been patches where you could potentially play this hero mid or maybe a support, but really we can just focus on the off-lane for the most part since that's the main role that this hero plays. And as an off-laner, you can think about Seer as one of, if not the best team fighter in the entire game. Pretty much only rivaled by heroes like Enigma that have these giant big ultimates that can turn the entire fight. And Seer is one of those heroes that has an amazing ultimate, amazing team fight, really hard to fight into high ground and in choke points, and just any kind of coordinated, focused team fight, Seer is going to excel in those areas. But Seer also has a lot of weaknesses, especially early on in the game. That kind of balances out his great late game team fighting with early games that are kind of a little bit awkward at times. Basically, you have to know what you're doing to take advantage of this hero's strengths early on, because if you don't, you're kind of just passively farming, not having much impact, and a lot of times you can even give the enemy carry a free game, which we really don't want. But overall, Seer is really about trying to maximize his potential early so he's not completely useless. He's going to get his farm for the most part, but you want to have impact early if you can, and then once you get that farm, once you scale into the late game, once you have a few items, you will just absolutely dominate in these big team fights. But before we can understand how to play Seer, we have to take a look at his abilities. So now that we understand Seer in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that great late game team fighter like I talked about, but does have some awkward parts as well. So first we can take a look at Vacuum. This is a really straightforward spell. Basically it has an AoE cast range you see there, and then you can cast it and you see anything in this blue circle basically gets sucked into the middle of the circle. So this is kind of a stun, like the hero is stunned during that, animation going towards the middle. It does cancel TPs, and it's a good way to reposition heroes as well. You can actually, reposition them over cliffs and other things like that, or pull them back. If you're chasing them or whatever, you can actually just pull them back towards you to get more hits on them and those kinds of things. So it's a positioning spell for the enemies, and also does decent damage, cancels TPs and other things like that, as well as setting up for your other spells, which we'll take a look at here in a second. Then next we can take a look at Ion Shell, and this is actually the focus of the hero, at least in the early part of the game, for farming and for laning and all those kinds of things. And basically what this does is it's kind of this little shield that you can place on yourself, like you can see right here, but you can also place it on creeps, enemy creeps, or allied creeps, and you can also place it on enemies. So I can actually place it on the axe here, and you would think, why would I ever want to place that on an enemy? This doesn't really make any sense. What does this actually do? Well, even though it gives you this buff and it is kind of like a shield, it looks like one, it's not really a shield in any direct sense. Really what it does is anyone that's close to the shield takes damage. So actually if you place it on an enemy, they don't take damage themselves, but if they get close to another ally of theirs, like a creep or a hero, then that creep or hero will take damage if they walk next to them. And then, if you're next to a creep wave or you're next to enemies, they will slowly tick down in damage. As you can see here as I run around the axe, you can see this kind of tiny animation, this purple line happening right next to the axe, indicating he's taking damage. You can see the numbers popping off there and his health bar just slowly draining down. So it's one of those things that if you're standing next to Seer or a creep or whatever that has this Ion Shell on, you will be taking damage. And as I said earlier, this is the main ability you're going to be focusing on in the laning stage to get last hits, to harass the enemy, to chase them down and do damage, to farm the jungle, to push out waves, all that kind of stuff. And that really continues on into the late game. It's just obviously this is going to do more damage early because people have low HP pools and stuff like that. But you're still going to be using this to farm throughout the entire game and to do some damage in those late game team fights as well. Then next we have the E ability, which is Surge, and this is mostly a survivability or mobility spell that gets you in or out of fights just depending on the situation. And basically you just press it on yourself or an ally, and then you have insane movement speed that you basically can't be slowed by. And so this is allowing you to get into the fights and maybe do more damage with Ion Shell when you're around them, and then maybe vacuum people in to come back towards you to take more damage from Ion Shell or your punches and those kinds of things. Or obviously if you're getting chased down, people are slowing you or whatever, you can just use Ion Shell to quickly get away, and this is really, really good for escaping or going in like I talked about. So this is great also not just for yourself in the laning stage, but also for your allies if there's some reason that you need to save an ally after they're getting gone on, or if you want to initiate and there's a slow hero on your team that just needs to get in there but doesn't have a blink, you can obviously use Surge on them to make them accelerate and chase somebody down, that kind of thing. And then lastly, we have the big team fight ultimate for the hero, which is Wall of Replica. And this is really what makes this hero such a late game force. And basically what you do with this ultimate is you just press the ability, and then you can see the AoE there, pretty big cast range, and then you press it down wherever you want the middle of the wall to be. And you have to hold it because then you can determine which direction you want the wall to face. So let's say I'm blocking a path from left to right here. I can make the wall go up and down. If I want to, block the path from up to down, then I can go left to right. So the arrow, wherever it's pointing, is where the wall is going to be. So if I want to hit somebody, like let's say I just want to hit this axe, I don't really want to place the wall here. I want to place it right on top of the axe. Then I'm just going to release it right there. And then you can see it immediately spawns an illusion of the axe, and that is really the main focus of this wall, is it creates illusions of the enemies that walk into it. So let's just have this axe actually delete this illusion there with these 2 rapiers. And then if the axe walks back in through it, then another illusion is spawned of the axe. And so basically, as long as this wall is up, if an enemy touches it, there will be an illusion that spawns. So even if the axe is sitting in it and keeps deleting his illusion, he will just keep spawning the illusion over and over and over again. You can also see that as the axe walks through it, he is slowed as well. So that's another big part of the wall, is it slows enemies. And obviously you can combo that with the vacuum to vacuum them back into the wall to slow them again, or to spawn more illusions if they deleted another illusion. So you can see how this can have a really detrimental effect to the enemy's positioning and to doing a ton of damage in the fights. You can obviously just vacuum a bunch of people into it as well. If there's like a high ground push or some other choke point, this is really, really effective at just dominating those areas of the map. Then the other thing is just to show you how you can combo all of these spells together. So basically, if you put wall down, let's say, and then you can vacuum the axe into it, right? And then obviously you can put an ion shell on your illusion, and then you can actually surge your illusion so that they can just chase down enemies like crazy and do insane amounts of damage. And this is a great combo for your illusions, but obviously also for your allies as well. But you can see how these abilities can all combo together to be an amazing late game force, and you can just do insane amounts of damage, especially if you get an illusion on a hero like Luna, let's say, where you get this illusion of Luna that's cleaving through everybody and just doing insane amounts of damage, is tanky and hard to deal with, has an ion shell and surge. This can be an insane force where you're now taking the power of the enemy and actually putting it back on them to do ridiculous damage to them. Even though they're the powerful one, it's almost like they don't want to be powerful and hit by this wall, because now all that damage is being turned back on them to actually win the fight against them. And then the last things to talk about are the Ags and the Shard. And the Shard is pretty straightforward. It just upgrades your Surge so that when you use it now, you have a trail behind you that slows enemies and they take slight damage when they walk through it. So this is pretty good. Pretty straightforward Shard. Not a huge deal, but does add a little bit of extra damage when you're running after people or when you're escaping. Makes it harder to chase you and those kinds of things for like blinks and just that slow in general. And then the Ags is huge on this hero. It's actually really important. You're probably buying this every single game, at least how it's made right now, because it is so important. And basically, it gives you this passive normal punch. And basically, just when you walk up to an enemy and you click them, you will stun them and they take damage, they get pushed back, and an illusion is spawned of that enemy. And basically, you want to combo this with Surge, because if you read normal punch there, you can see that the amount of damage and the amount of stun that you do to the enemy is based on how far you've moved in the last 3 seconds. So you want to use Surge, obviously just run all the way up to them and then punch them, and then they will fly in a direction, do a ton of damage, and be stunned for a while they take a bunch of damage from the illusion. So this is a great way to combo these two abilities, and you can see normal punch has a pretty low cooldown, so you're going to be using this a ton, and it makes it so you can gank one hero or have some effectiveness without having to blow your ultimate, which has a pretty long cooldown. Then as for the passive and the facets, we have a passive here that is pretty straightforward. Whenever you level up, you restore a certain level of your mana and health. And this is just not great later on. That doesn't really matter too much in the later portion of the game, but it is good in the early portion of the laning stage. And as we will talk about in a minute, the laning stage for this hero can be a little bit awkward, so this passive definitely does help. Then as for facets, we have Quick Wit here, which basically gives Dark Seer attack speed from intelligence. This is pretty good at times, especially if you have an Ags. Just use it a bunch, get that attack off really quickly, and just do more right-click damage, but you're usually not focusing on right-click as much with the hero. So Heart of Battle is a very good one where Dark Seer moves faster when near other heroes. So if he's going to be in this team fight, when he's around other heroes or around enemies and those kinds of things, it's just great to have extra move speed, which obviously also helps with your Ags as well. So it's one of those things that you're probably going to be, using a lot, and you're probably going to be picking this facet in a lot of different games. And now that we understand Dark Seer's abilities, we can see how to play him in a game. Now, in terms of Dark Seer's laning stage, this is probably one of the more awkward and unique laning stages in the entire game. And that's kind of the weakness of the hero in general, from my opinion, because You know, you want levels on this hero. You need levels in all of your abilities. Level 1 Ion Shell, not really that great. Level 1 Vacuum, not great. You don't want to be taking Surge level 1 either. That's super passive, and it's not really great to have that. So you need your levels, and your farm is just going to come from using Ion Shell, getting a bunch of points in that, pushing out the wave and going jungle. And a lot of times, if you can't coordinate really well with your 4 position, you're not going to have a lot of aggressive potential unless you're really pushing the wave in, diving the enemy, and really know what you're doing and getting the most out of this hero's aggressive potential, where you're not, you know, getting tower aggro, you're just Ion Shelling yourself, you're Ion Shelling the creeps, you're chasing them down, you're being really annoying, and you're harassing the enemy. But a lot of times that can be hard, like I said, if you don't have a 4 position that's really coordinating with you. So that's why in pubs especially, this hero can a lot of times just feel like a pretty passive hero where you're just getting your farm. And that can actually be okay, because then, you know, once you get your eggs, once you get to a later portion of the game, you're going to start scaling really well. But you really need to try to, as much as possible, learn how to take advantage of this hero's strengths once you get a few levels. But regardless of that, you're going to be fairly weak in the early part of the lane, just Ion Shelling the wave, trying to get as much farm and experience as you can. Then eventually, as the lane does progress, like I talked about, you have a few more levels. You can Ion Shell yourself. You can Ion Shell a creep wave. You can kind of push the creeps under the tower. And if the enemy doesn't have a great way of dealing with that Ion Shelled creep, then you could potentially kind of push them out of tower range or dive them, or, you know, get really aggressive on the support, those kinds of things. Maybe if the support's pulling, you can really attack them, especially if your 4 is really good and coordinated with you. And you can really get aggressive at certain moments, but otherwise, if you feel like you can't, or your 4 is not really participating very much, you can just push the wave in and then go farm jungle, just to make sure you're getting your farm, you're having a good game in general. Even though you might be giving a free game to the enemy, that's okay. You can at least get your farm for the most part on the hero. So that's why a lot of times people will pick this hero as an offlaner. It's just kind of an easy way to get through the game, to just push the wave in, not have to lane very much. And so that's why personally, it's just kind of my, you know, little diatribe here is I don't love the hero for new players, because sometimes they can just default to Ion Shelling the wave and then not having to learn the basics of laning. And so that can be a little bit of an issue. If you find yourself just Ion Shelling the wave, pushing it in and not getting aggressive, then you really need to try to figure out either how to get aggressive with the hero, how to try to learn that skill, or play another hero that allows you to learn how to be aggressive, so that when you do go back to playing Dark Seer, you can try to take advantage of the times when this hero is strong, because those windows are tight and you really need to take advantage of them. Then transitioning out of the laning stage, you want to use your Ion Shell to push the waves in as much as possible wherever you are on the map. You could be off lane, mid lane, safe lane, wherever you are, because if you TP there, you ran there, or a fight happened or whatever, you want to be using your Ion Shell on the creep wave to push the wave in. Just make it annoying for the enemy to deal with the Dark Seer by just not really having to be there, and just the waves are always pushing in. That can always be a benefit, plus it can give you some passive farm just from having that Ion Shell there. Then you want to be using your Ion Shells on yourself to also farm the jungle. That's a really big and important part of the hero. And then always having the ability to TP or be at a fight. You always want to be at fights once you hit level 6, because it's so important. This hero can just be such an insane impact fight hero to defend towers or push towers, and just having that choke point, especially at mid, for instance, where there's a bunch of ramps and stuff, having Dark Seer in those fights is so important. And then as it stands now in the mid game, having Ags is so important, because you just need the ability to participate in fights and have impact in fights or ganks without having to blow your ultimate. Yes, your ultimate isn't as big of a cooldown as it used to be, but it's still a pretty big cooldown ability. So you don't want to be using it just for one hero to gank in a side lane. You want to have it for all the big team fights. And if you have Ags, you have an ability to stun, to be annoying, to do a bunch of damage, and to really get the most out of the hero without having to blow your ultimate, and then having your ultimate on reserve when a bigger fight breaks out or a better opportunity presents itself for that ultimate. And then in terms of late game team fights, you can think about the hero in 2 primary ways. You either want to figure out if you're going to be the initiator or if you're going to be the counter initiator. And it really depends on matchups. It depends on, you know, what heroes are on your team, what heroes are on the enemy team, whether you're winning or losing. You know, if you're going high ground, they're going high ground, so on and so forth. Because you can definitely function as an initiation. You can run in, use your punch with your passive, you know, just instantly kill a hero, blow them up, put them out of position, use your ultimate on them if you need to, and that can totally be enough to win the fights, to kind of just instantly start off the fight on a good footing. Or maybe that's not enough. Maybe you feel like that really puts you in a vulnerable position. Blowing up one hero is not enough. or maybe you have other heroes on your team that can do that initiation for you, and you don't want to be using all of your abilities immediately, you know, exposing yourself, those kinds of things. In those situations, or maybe let's say you're losing, so you're defending high ground, you want to be a little bit more passive, you can sit back and wait for the perfect opportunity when the enemy kind of shows themselves, groups up, or just is out of position, and then you jump in for a huge vacuum wall, for a huge punch, and then you do insane amounts of damage, and you honestly just win the team fight off of that one jump in, that one counter initiation when they're out of position. But also, for the most part, even though you have those two primary ways of playing the hero in the late game, you still want to make sure that you're not just super passive. You're not just only using your ultimate and just waiting for a position to use your ultimate, like, let's say, an Enigma. I would say Enigma late game is a good kind of counter example where you really are, after 30-40 minutes, just using Black Hole at these big spots to win the fight. Yes, you can kind of do that with Darkseer, of course, but you also want to make sure that you're running around, being annoying, ion shelling people, jumping in, you know, maybe annoying the supports, running after them, you know, surging yourself out of danger, surging your teammates out of danger if they get initiated on, vacuuming people, just being super annoying, especially with your Ags and your punch that only has this 10-second cooldown. You can use that 3, maybe even 4 times in a fight. So it's not that you want to be totally passive. You're not only looking for big ultimates. You want to figure out ways to have impact with that Ags and with your other abilities here and there, even without your ultimate, or before you cast your ultimate, and wait for that big timing when people are out of position. And that, everyone, is my Darkseer guide. If you liked the video or found it helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.